You're listening to Lead, Sell, Grow the Human Experience podcast. I am your host, Eric Konovalov, and I believe that we can achieve everything we want if we take our leadership, sales ability, and personal growth to a higher level. On this show, we share ideas on how to break through our invisible boundaries, start taking steps towards our dreams, and create the life we desire. I invite you to open your mind to new possibilities, new ideas, and to the truth that everything you want is possible for you. Thank you for being here and welcome to the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lead, Sell, Grow the Human Experience podcast. I hope you're having an amazing day and want to thank you for listening in today. I know you have a ton of options to listen to, but today we truly do have a great show. Now, before I begin and before I introduce my guest who's going to talk all about emotional intelligence today, we're going to dive really deep into emotional intelligence and why that's important for us to develop. I want to make sure that we connect outside of this platform. So head over to Facebook, join Lead, Sell, Grow, the Human Experience Mastermind. Let's have some conversations. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the show. And if it resonates with you, go down, hit the 5 stars, leave a review. I greatly appreciate it. So without any further ado, my guest today is Phil Johnson. He is the founder and executive coach at Master of Business Leadership Program. Phil, how are you doing today?
Great, Eric. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Pleasure to have you here. So tell me about MBL.
It's a program I've developed to help people develop their emotional intelligence, become more inspirational leaders, and raise their level of awareness about what's going on in them and around them.
Okay, so
go ahead.
We hear IQ, we hear EQ. What's the difference there?
Big difference. Emotional intelligence is developed by what we do, not what we think. It's an experiential process. Whereas our ability to do intellectual labor is largely genetic. If you have a high IQ, your parents had a high IQ, their parents had a high IQ, and you inherited it. So whereas not everybody can have 160 IQ, anybody can develop their emotional intelligence. There was a study by UC Berkeley over 40 years, and they determined that emotional intelligence was 400% more important in determining success than intellectual intelligence. And actually, I think that number is low. Here's a way to compare the two. Think of intellectual intelligence, your ability to do intellectual labor, as somebody giving you $10,000 a day for 31 days.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of 31 days, you've got $310,000. Think of emotional intelligence as a penny that doubles in value every day for 31 days. So day 1, you've got a penny. Day 2, you've got 2 pennies. Day 31, you've got $10.7 million.
Wow.
And actually continuing on, day 40, you've got over 5 billion. Day 50, you've got over 5 trillion. The point is that it doesn't take any more effort to go from day 30 to day 31 than it did to go from day 1 to day 2. But it's a building process. The results are remarkable. I've been an executive coach, coaching executives in organizations all over the world for the last 21 years. I helped generate about $1.5 billion. I've coached people running multi-billion-dollar companies with thousands of employees and Harvard MBAs and PhDs. I can tell you that it's the development of emotional intelligence will guarantee career, corporate, and personal success. I could also tell you that it's harder than hell to do. It's like Navy SEAL training for your emotions. So that's what I've been doing for the last 21 years, helping executives and organizations go through the process of developing their inspirational leadership and emotional intelligence.
Okay, I want to dive deep into that, but before we do, how do you define emotional intelligence?
A very simple way to think of it. It's actually quite complex, but a very simple way to think of emotional intelligence is it's the ability to feel the fear and anxiety that change and innovation always triggers in us, and be able to move through that fear towards the vision of your desired results, as opposed to allowing that anxiety to keep you trapped in your comfort zone. There's three primary sources we have of resistance to change. Let me go through them real quick. First one is we have this part of our old lizard brain called the amygdala that's been trying to keep us safe and alive for the last 500 million years by making sure we never leave the safety of our comfort zone. And if we do, it secretes a hormone into our bloodstream called cortisol. And that causes the executive center of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, to shut off. And we go into what psychologists refer to as an amygdala hijack. We go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. Some people lash out, some people run away, some people freeze like a deer in the headlights. And when that happens in conflict situations, people die. And when it happens in business or personal situations, relationships die. We burn trust. So as an analogy, if you think of your amygdala as a very frightened 4-year-old child, the development of our emotional intelligence acts like a big brother or a big sister to quiet that amygdala response down and better enable us to feel the fear and anxiety that change and innovation always triggers in us, and move through it towards what it is we're trying to achieve, as opposed to allowing that anxiety to keep us trapped in our comfort zone. The second biological source of resistance is our existing habits. Once we develop a habit is really a neural network pathway in our brain that we develop through our actions. Once we develop a habit, it's there forever. And although we can develop new habits, better habits at any age, that's called brain plasticity or neurogenesis, those new habits are always going to be weaker than our old habits. There's a insulation layer around the neural network pathway called myelin, and it's thicker when we're younger and it's thinner when we're older. So there's always going to be an internal battle between our old and new habits for dominance. The third major source of resistance to change is sociological, meaning the people around us don't want us to change, because if we change and start to get better results, maybe they're going to have to change. That scares the hell out of them. And the best way to ensure they don't have to change is to make sure we fail. So they can say, look, I told you so, now shut up, keep your head down, and get back into the herd with the rest of us. So those are the three major sources of resistance we have to change. We really suck at change. And we're actually facing a tsunami of change with a 500 million year old brain that doesn't like change. So that's going to, as the rate of change continues to accelerate throughout this century, that's going to create increasing levels of drama, chaos, and conflict everywhere. And the only solution is the development of our emotional intelligence. That's why I'm having these discussions, to help people to become more conscious of the value and importance of the development of their emotional intelligence. It's a critical part of our development that's missing. Our educational system has failed us. Our employment system has failed us. They failed to prepare us for the world we're living in, and are going to, some scientists estimated in this century, we could experience the equivalent of as much as 20,000 years worth of change. So change is increasing at an exponential rate. And we really, biologically, we're not set up to accept change quickly.
There's so much there to unpack. Yet, I just want to say that naturally we change all the time.
No, we don't. we're only conscious about 3 to 5% of the time. And over 95% of our behavior and results is habitual. We do the same thing. 95% of what we do every day is the same as we did the day before.
And so what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, building your emotional intelligence really is taking yourself off of autopilot and becoming more intentional about what it is that you want to do. And even if you're afraid, doing it anyway.
Yeah. So in order to be able to do this work, in order to be able to do the emotional labor that the development of emotional intelligence requires, you have to have an emotional connection to a desired result that you're trying to achieve that's stronger than the fear that's going to be generated in you when you step outside of your comfort zone. A good example of emotional labor is the training you've gone through in the military and the situations you found yourself in that have scared the hell out of you. But you've forced yourself to move through that fear to achieve an objective. And that's what I call emotional labor. And that process taught you things about yourself, and it taught you things about other people that you wouldn't have had those insights otherwise. It raised your level of awareness about what's going on in you and around you. And you know how hard the emotional labor is that you are doing. That is the only way people can develop their emotional intelligence.
What do you mean by you know how hard that emotional labor is?
I don't think you could have gone through all the training you've gone through and had the experiences in the places you've had them without having to step outside of your comfort zone on a regular basis.
It's interesting you say that, because I think even though there were new things, even though there were scary things, the fact that we did it with our friends, brothers in arms, it didn't feel like it's necessarily outside of a comfort.
Yeah, you had a level of trust. It's called oxytocin that gets released in our brain when you trust the guy beside you and they trust you. But you're still in some pretty hairy situations.
Yeah, so like it makes me wonder, the baseline of what's happening around us for people is different, right? So my kids growing up here in the United States just moved to Florida. They have a really, really cushy life, right? Me, I was born in former USSR, Azerbaijan, civil war broke out. We had tanks on every corner. We had, we heard shots and people getting killed on the streets. I grew up differently viewing things like that than my children do.
Yep.
Now, if we grow up, like me growing up that way, in constant state of fear or change or whatever, that doesn't make me more like that doesn't increase my emotional intelligence per se, if that's where I grew up, right?
No, if it's the process of feeling the fear and moving through it that develops emotional intelligence. It's not the fear. For some people, the fear keeps them stuck in their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the process of feeling the fear and moving through it to some objective that develops emotional intelligence. It's not the emotional intelligence doesn't eliminate fear. It eliminates the hold that fear has on you. You feel the fear, acknowledge it, and move through it, as opposed to denying it and keeping and staying in your comfort zone.
Are there tests to measure somebody's EQ like there are to measure IQ?
Sure.
Where can someone find that?
I do it as part of my Master of Business Leadership program. It's just, but the short answer to your question is the more emotionally intelligent somebody is, the easier it is for them to spot it in somebody else or the lack of it.
And I mean, based on what you're saying, really, it's if people get stuck at the place of fear. So I want to open up a new business and something inside is just like pumping the brakes, whether I know I could see in the results that what I want isn't happening, but I'm afraid. Maybe I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of what people are going to think of me, whatever it might be.
Yep.
That's how you spot somebody with a lack of emotional intelligence.
Yeah. They're being controlled by their fear. Their desire for better results isn't stronger than their fear of leaving their comfort zone. They may want better results, but they're not going to be willing to do the emotional labor that getting better results requires. And quite frankly, that applies to most people. Most people aren't willing to do the emotional labor that the development of their emotional intelligence requires. So what they do instead, if they're not willing to change themselves, they try to use position-based power to change everybody else. They try and use position-based power to control and manipulate others. That's why the current level of employee engagement worldwide, according to Gallup, is around 13%. Low levels of employee engagement are costing the US economy over $1 trillion a year. So if your employees don't feel safe, and by the way, there's almost a one-to-one correlation between the level of employee engagement and the level of customer engagement. So if your employees don't feel safe, neither do your customers. See, most organizations don't have the kind of trust that you experienced with your buddies in the military. That oxytocin that gets released in their brains isn't there. So they're in a very toxic, fearful environment that leads to low levels of disengagement.
So then it's the leader's job to help their people develop emotional intelligence, or if the leader improves and develops his or her emotional intelligence, then the people automatically follow.
Yes, and I'll get into that, but I want to make sure leadership's not a position.
Right.
It's a choice that we all need to make. If you need a title to get people to follow you, you're not a leader. If your actions don't inspire followers, you're not a leader. You know this. And we all need to be better leaders. We all need to be betting on ourselves by developing our emotional intelligence.
And the way to do that is constantly move through fear.
Yeah.
Got it. So what type of fear are you seeing? You're an executive coach for decades now, and you're dealing with leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming in positional leaders, as well as good leaders who may not be in a leadership position.
Sure.
What are they afraid of?
Everything. They're pick something. Revenue, employee engagement or disengagement, low levels of customer, their personal life, their career.
But what's keeping them stuck? How do you identify an area where they're stuck and start coaching them through that?
I ask them what they want.
Okay.
First question I ask is, what do you want? Because when somebody tells you what they want, they're also telling you what they don't have. And the bigger the gap between where they are versus where they want to be, the more motivated they are to look for a solution to close that gap.
Do you find that people know what they want?
Great question. I talked about the penny doubling journey.
Mm-hmm.
What they want on day one evolves as they develop their emotional intelligence. So what they want shifts. Typically, there's only There's only two sources of motivation that will cause somebody to be willing to do the emotional labor of leaving their comfort zone or leaving their foxhole. One is fear, the other one is passion, and hardly anybody's connected with their passion. So that the folks I work with initially are usually driven by fear. They have an urgent desire for better results than they're currently getting around something. So they're driven by fear to get away from something. But in the process, their motivation shifts from a motivation to get away from something to a more passionate motivation to move towards something, to move towards a vision of a desired result. Does that make any
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. I mean, it makes absolutely perfect sense. And as an executive coach, I see that quite a bit as well. I just never tied emotional intelligence to your definition. As the first time I've ever heard that definition of it.
I'll tell you
I
something. Go ahead.
a lot of times I hear emotional intelligence tied to empathy, understanding.
Empathy is just one aspect of many, many aspects of emotional intelligence. And empathy is important, and it can be an indicator of a level of emotional intelligence, but it's just one of many.
Mm. What were some other ones?
Courage, insight into who you are, inspirational leadership, optimism, confidence. There's about 18 that come off the top of my head. Team building, all sorts of them. They're all byproducts of developing your emotional intelligence.
Got it. And so someone who's lacking in emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
how do you get them to move through the fear? If they've just let fear stop them every single time, they just don't move through it.
Mhm.
And they don't even know they're not doing it.
Mhm.
That subconscious voice is like, it whispers, right? This is not a good idea. It talks you out of it before you even take the step. How do you get them to recognize it, one, and take the step?
Again, I ask them what they want. Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Without that motivation to achieve better results than they're currently getting, usually driven by pain, you can't help them. It's impossible. They may want better results, but if they don't have that motivation, if their desire for better results isn't stronger than their fear, they will not be willing to do the emotional labor that getting better results requires. So you can't help them. They're just not in enough pain yet. Come back and see me when you're in more pain. That's really true.
I mean, if they're hiring a coach, chances are they know that they're not where they want to be.
Well, sure. So that maybe that's an indicator that they're motivated to do the work that achieving better results requires. If they're not motivated to do the work, I can't help them. Doesn't matter how much money they pay me.
Can you tell me about a few, like how you consciously develop your emotional intelligence?
Sure.
Maybe give me some examples over the past, like with COVID or, in the last.
I'll go back 68 years.
Perfect.
because I'm 68 years old. Hey, you want me to go through my life story in 3 minutes?
If it helps us with the emotional intelligence, sure. I personally just listened to your life story on YouTube in the
Okay.
MBL. I know
Okay.
you were born in 1953. I know your father was born in 1908.
8.
And one thing I think I heard you say that he took you home on a bicycle.
No, he used to pedal. I spent my first 6 months in an incubator at the local hospital because I was born prematurely,
That's right.
and he rode breast milk up to me at the hospital every day on his bicycle because he didn't own a car.
That was it. Okay. Yeah, I would love to hear your story. But I want you to know I have heard your story.
Okay, so I was born with dyslexia.
Mhm.
And my brain doesn't work the way most people's brains work. And that forced me out of my comfort zone. It forced me to do a lot of emotional labor um, that gave me insights into myself and other people that I wouldn't have had otherwise. It's kind of like a blind person that develops great hearing. And back in those days, there was no such thing as dyslexia or ADD or ADHD. I was just labeled a slow learner. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 5. So I didn't realize I had dyslexia until about 35 years ago. But looking back, I can see how my dyslexia was actually a gift, because I guarantee you, if I hadn't been born with dyslexia, I would not be doing the work I'm doing today. It's that hard. It's kind of like going to the dentist. You'd never go to the dentist unless you're either in pain or trying to avoid pain, right?
Right.
Same thing with emotional intelligence.
Why? Help me understand. Why wouldn't you be doing the work you're doing? Because it's hard for you to do the work
Because
having
I
dyslexia.
because I wouldn't have developed the awareness of the importance. I wouldn't have gotten the results in my career that I achieved
Hmm.
if I hadn't had to do the emotional labor that I've been doing in my life from an early age.
Got it. So you constantly being outside of your comfort zone, where it might take one child, 2 hours to read a chapter and understand it. It might take you a week to read the same chapter to finally grasp it. You had to work a lot harder,
Right,
and you've developed your emotional intelligence. Okay. So
right.
are you familiar with David Goggins, by the way?
No,
No, I think he's known as like the strongest man, not the strongest man, but anyway, this is the one guy that's been through every special warfare school there is: Navy SEALs,
cool,
Rangers,
cool.
sniper school, runs 100+ mile, races. But at one point in his life, he weighed over 300 pounds and was killing roaches and just said, I had enough. And what he says, like one of his taglines is, embrace the suck. Do something that sucks every single day. And I think what he's talking about is get out of your comfort zone every single day. Whatever your fear is, go conquer it, go do it. And that's how you
Yeah,
do it.
that's there's something called the golden rule of flow. And that's basically if you move outside of your comfort zone by 4% or more, you trigger, you stop thinking and you focus more on the present moment. So he's right, and that's a lot of what Navy SEAL training is it forces people to feel their fear and move through it towards the vision, towards a desired result, as opposed to allowing that fear to control them. And that's exactly what that's exactly what samurai training is. Um, before a samurai went into battle, he made peace with himself and his family that he was going to die, that he wasn't coming back. So that allowed him to be more present when he was in the struggle. And the people he was struggling with were largely being controlled by their fear. So they weren't as present, they weren't as creative in the moment. So having that presence, having that ability to stay calm in the midst of a firestorm is a huge advantage. And that's emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence means not allowing your fear to control your emotions.
Is it just fear or other?
It's ego-based fear. Yeah.
What was the first? Did you say ego?
Ego-based fear. We live in a fear-based world. We get bombarded with fear messaging 24/7. It's actually a form of slavery. We're scared to death to step out of our comfort zone. So we're much easier to control and manipulate when we're being driven by our fear. When we're not being driven by our fear, we have greater agency. We're much harder to control. It's called freedom.
But then if you're not being driven by fear, can you improve your emotional intelligence? Can you ever get through it?
The motivation changes from a motivation based on fear to a motivation based on love. See, fear is something we try to, it can be a motivator, but it's a motivator in the sense that we're trying to get away from it. Love is something we're trying to move towards.
So Phil, why do people need an executive coach like you to come tell them to, go do stuff they're afraid of?
Because they want better results.
I know, but what else is there once you tell them, all right, the reason you're not getting better results is because you're not doing the stuff you should be doing, and you're not doing it because you're afraid. Boom.
Because they already know that.
Right.
The problem isn't that we don't know what to do. That's knowing something, reading a book or having a conversation like this is an intellectual process. It will do nothing to develop emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is an experiential process. That's where the shit hits the fan. That's where all the resistance kicks in. We're too good at lying to ourselves. We're too good at telling ourselves rational lies to keep us stuck in our comfort zone. We need the external accountability. We need the Sherpa guide to help to guide us through our fear towards the direction of our desired results. Could you do it on your own? Absolutely. Would it take 100 times as long? Probably.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying. Couldn't agree with you more. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking about even this podcast. Since probably 2016, I wanted to start my podcast. And it would be on my New Year's resolution sheet. This year, I'm starting a podcast. And I've had it there 2016, 17, 18, 19. And then finally in 2020, I started a podcast. But that was fear-based like crazy.
Yeah. See, Eric, you make a great point. Intellectually, you wanted to start a podcast and you knew why and all of that. But what was holding you back wasn't your intellect. It was a lack of, it was fear.
It was fear.
It was the emotion of fear.
Yeah.
See, if what you do doesn't, how do I say this? If what you do isn't aligned with what you think and what you say, you're out of integrity.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to see what's going on inside of somebody, simply look at what they do, not what they say, because what they do will reflect not only what they think, but how they feel emotionally. So you wanted to start a podcast intellectually, but emotionally, you didn't. Okay.
Emotionally, I didn't.
Right. You were afraid.
I was afraid. Yeah.
You were telling yourself all the reasons you couldn't do it.
Right.
I need more money. I need more time. I got to do this. I got to do that. Blah, 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 blah. Bottom line is you didn't do it. But at some point, you reached a point where your desire to start a podcast was greater than your fear. So you said, screw it, and you started the podcast. That's emotional labor.
Okay, so what should I learn from that moment or from that experience, what should my lesson be that next time I'm afraid, in a
Yep.
similar way,
Yep.
I can
Great.
use what I've used before to move past it?
Great question. You have to develop an emotional connection to a desired result that motivates you to leave your comfort zone. So that emotional connection is the fuel for the journey. Without that emotional connection, you're not going anywhere.
How do you do that?
Visualize, um, go for a walk. Try and well, let's pick something. What would you just hypothetically? What would you like to do now that you're not currently doing? Just pick
You're putting
something.
me on the spot. There's a bunch of stuff that pops
Just
up,
pick
Phil.
anything.
One is I'd like to create a community of entrepreneurs that I can get on a call with and mentor and coach.
Good. Okay, so stop there.
Mhm.
Now, why do you want to create that community?
Because it's gonna. So my ultimate goal, once my youngest kid is 9 years old, my wife and I have this plan that once the kid is out, at 18 or whatever, let's say 18 years old, he goes to college, goes to the military, start whatever he does, but is self-sufficient. So my job now is to raise a self-sufficient man, that my wife and I get to live in Europe for 6 months at a time in a different city and then fly back here. So we want the type of lifestyle that I can work from anywhere, and doing corporate trainings where I have to physically be present doesn't it doesn't align with that vision. So the way to
Okay, so hang on. I want you to connect with the emotion of what it is you're trying to achieve, not what you're trying to get away from.
gotcha. Oh,
So,
I'm trying to achieve freedom.
so okay, stop. What does freedom mean to you?
Be able to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want.
Too vague. What does freedom mean to you? Come
That's
on, you grew up in Russia. What does freedom mean to you?
that's exactly what it means to me. Be able to do what I want. So in this case, freedom to me would be having enough income coming in. I have a specific number where I don't physically have to be present, and being able to travel the world with my wife, live where I want to live for as long as I want to
How
live there.
how would that make you feel emotionally?
Hmm. I mean,
Keep going.
the
Keep
word that
keep
comes
going.
to mind is joy.
Okay. So you need to connect with the joy you will feel traveling the world with your wife, because that
Okay.
emotional connection needs to be stronger than the fear of leaving your comfort zone to make that happen.
Okay.
If it's not, you will not leave your comfort zone. You'll want it, but you won't do the work to get it. So
Why
the real
is that? Because it's not comfortable, or
fear,
because I don't
fear,
believe?
fear,
Just fear of, but
fear.
fear of what? Like, I'm looking back at the
It
podcast.
doesn't matter. Fear of any, name it. Um, the point is that your ego-based fear is stopping you from taking action.
Are you saying the word eagle or ego?
Ego, ego.
EGO. Got it. Okay. Ego-based fear is stopping me from taking action. Okay, fine.
Yep.
And so in this case, it's my wife and I just took a nice trip to Paris and southern France, and I can take myself back to how I felt there and understand that joy and
Excellent.
connect it to the future. But
Excellent.
let's say I didn't take that trip and I've never traveled, but I just know I want to do it in the future. How would I connect? How would I even begin to think of what that would feel like?
Visualize how that might feel emotionally. Visualize emotionally how great you're going to feel, how loving, how much fun you guys are going to have exploring the world together. That is the fuel to motivate you to begin moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm. I understand. So it's not so much about believing whether I actually can or can't achieve that, if that could be reality.
No, it's an emotion.
It's an emotion.
Emotion motivates behavior. Emotion motivates behavior. So you need to connect with an emotion that's going to motivate you to begin moving in that direction.
Okay. Can you give me an example when you've done something like that that helped you get through your fear?
Yeah. I wanted to get through high school. I wanted to go to the same high school as my two older brothers went, a 5-year arts and science, and I was slated to go to a trade school because of my marks. I was terrible in grade school, and I committed to do whatever I needed to do to work my ass off to get into that high school. And I did the same thing through university, and I did the same thing. I studied electrical engineering. I was very successful in my corporate career in the semiconductor industry, and I've been great as a coach. My vision, I've had many visions over my lifetime. The vision provided the motivation for me to leave my comfort zone, to go to the next level, to go to the next level, to go to the next level. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I mean, it does answer my question. I'm curious, like how someone, so you've done that, looking back at it, you've done that in high school. You weren't who you are right now with emotional intelligence. What
Oh,
I'm
no,
curious
no.
about, but I'm pretty sure you still feel fear in your
Oh,
life.
absolutely, every day.
So now I want the emotional intelligence expert, Phil. I want to know how you go through these things. How do you go through fear? How do you visualize? How do you attach the emotion of joy or whatever it might be for you to get through your levels of fear? Because Phil, fear, no matter what level you're on, like you said, the amygdala is going to try to keep you safe. So maybe there are some things you're not even hearing, right?
Oh,
And it's
absolutely.
keeping you stuck. It's
Oh,
crazy to
absolutely.
think of that, but
Oh, no, absolutely. But my desire to be of service to you and your audience is greater than my fear. My desire to be of service to the people I coach is greater than my fear. I've been on 50 podcasts over the last 5 months talking about the value and importance of emotional intelligence. My desire to be of service, my desire I think we're at a tipping point as a species on the planet. I think that if we don't, because of the accelerating rate of global change and the drama, chaos, and conflict that's going to create, I think that if we don't change our trajectory dramatically in the next 10 to 15 years, I don't think we survive as a species this century. I think we're at a tipping point as a species. There isn't a single other species on the planet that wouldn't be better off if humanity didn't exist. We're the virus. In relative terms, we've been on the planet for less than half of a second. And in that time, we've destroyed the climate. We're facing things like CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology, AI, other pandemics, and we do not have the wisdom. We do not have the emotional intelligence. Years ago, Mark Twain said, if the only way mankind can learn is through experience, I see no hope for mankind. Meaning, if the only way we can learn is by putting our hand on the stove, that assumes that we're going to be around to learn from it. And a number of the things we're facing today, you don't get a do-over. We've got to get it right before putting our hand on the stove. And that's going to require a much greater sense of awareness, a much greater sense of emotional intelligence than we're demonstrating. We have such a long way to go to change our trajectory, and so relatively little time to do it. That's why I do what I do. That's why I'm on this podcast, to try and find some people that are motivated to be the kind of inspirational leaders we need to inspire us to follow in their direction. I'm only going to be on the planet for another 10 or 15 years, and I'm okay with that. But there's so much work that needs to get done in order to ensure our survival for our kids and their kids. And we're failing. We're failing.
So if the world nominated you right now to hand, hey, Phil, you got 10 to 15 years here. We need to change this trajectory ASAP. What are you doing?
Looking for all of the people that have above average levels of emotional intelligence and inspiring them to stand up and be the leaders we need for the rest of us.
But what does that really mean? Like, what type of leaders do we need, and what type of leaders do they need to be?
There's something that I haven't talked about yet, but there's an underlying energy physics to all of this. They need to be the type of individual whose behavior and results inspire us to follow their example.
Okay, but Hitler was one of those people.
No, he wasn't.
He was the type of individual, and a bunch of people,
Hitler was a coward. Hitler didn't inspire people. He didn't lift people up. He put people down. Big difference.
Well, I mean, he inspired the Nazi party. Listen, I'm Jewish, so it's hard for me to put a guy like that on a pedestal. But
no, he didn't. He didn't. He scared the hell out of people into following him. He used position-based power to control and manipulate others to follow him. That's not leadership.
You don't think that when that guy came out of World War I and got out of jail or whatever, he didn't, and before he was the Hitler as we know him, he didn't inspire people with the rhetoric BS he was spewing?
Yeah, that's not leadership. You just said it yourself, BS.
To us, it's BS, but to them, it was inspirational, right? Hey, we are the strong race. We're the Aryan race, and everyone else is weaker. We got to get rid of all the weaker races.
People are often very willing to give away their power, to give away their energy to others to make decisions for them. That's not leadership. An authentic leader doesn't want to take your power. It wants you to help. It wants to help you to develop your own power.
Okay. So
I don't want
leaders.
I don't want you to be like me. I want you to be you. I want you to be who you truly are, not who you think you are, but who you really are.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you got the rein. If we gave you the reins, obviously hypothetically speaking, to change the trajectory, the first thing you would do is find the leaders, the good leaders who can inspire others to be their true authentic selves. And at what point does that change the trajectory? Like what you mentioned environment, but how's good leadership that helps people live who they truly are save the planet?
Because we've grown up in herds over millions of years, we've had to develop the ability to sense whether somebody's trying to help us or eat us. So brain scientists, we have these specialized brain cells in our prefrontal cortex that brain scientists call mirror neurons. I call them bullshit meters. So that's why when you walk into a room, you can sense the energy in the room. When you have a conversation with somebody, you can sense whether they're trying to help you or hurt you. That's those mirror neurons.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't fake being authentic. And as you develop your emotional intelligence, people sense that you're not trying to hurt them and you're not trying to steal their energy. And that motivates them to want to be around you more. That inspires them to follow your example. That makes sense?
Yeah, perfect sense. I like that. That was a great explanation.
It's energy physics. Let me give you another example. I know it's B2B sales. I'll give you an example of a company that's currently doing over $1 trillion a year in sales revenue. And their primary hiring focus is on attracting people with above average levels of emotional intelligence. That company is Apple. That's why when you walk into an Apple store, that energy you feel is an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment. They're not trying to sell you anything. They're trying to understand your pain and, if possible, offer a solution to your pain. Whether you buy anything or not is secondary. They want you to have a great experience, and maybe you'll go tell your friends, and maybe they'll tell their friends. And if you think about it, that energy in those Apple stores is a very different energy than the energy in the stores around it, right?
Yeah.
That's an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment. Emotional intelligence represents the future of organizational development. And by the way, you probably know this, but all purchasing decisions are made emotionally first. After you've made the decision emotionally in the limbic part of our brain, we look for features and benefits intellectually to justify the decision we've already made emotionally. So the development of emotional intelligence, you can write this down. The development of your emotional intelligence will enable you to outcarry your competition. Your emotional intelligence will enable you to develop deeper, more trusted advisor relationships with the people you seek to serve than your competitors. And there's something called the trust economy that's growing much faster than the traditional economy. Because of the accelerating rate of global change, we can't keep up. Things are just happening too fast. So we're relying more and more on our network of trusted advisors to make choices. The trust economy is currently estimated at over $10 trillion a year. And it's so your ability, your network of trusted relationships as an individual or as an organization is the most valuable asset you have. And your trustability is directly related to your level of emotional intelligence.
You know, so everything you're saying, I agree with, but the only question that comes to mind is when you were defining emotional intelligence, you said it's how you can move through fear.
Yep.
And I'm having a tough time connecting that to trustability, to the energy in the Apple store.
Okay. All right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. There's a piece of information I need to give you that will help all this make sense.
I love gifts.
It's going to take me about 3 minutes. What I'm going to describe, I've been proving over the last 21 years everywhere in the world. Okay. It's the root cause and the root cause solution to all drama, chaos, and conflict. So here goes. When we're born, we're not born with a conscious mind. Our conscious mind doesn't kick in until we're about a year or so old. But we are born with an unconscious mind, and we immediately start wiring up our brain, creating the neural network pathways that become our habits. And a lot of those habits, we're doing it to survive, to fit in, to get food, that kind of stuff. And a lot of those habits unconsciously are causing us to give away our energy. And we do it in a myriad of ways. How we communicate, listen, take responsibility, make decisions, all sorts of ways. But when we're unconsciously giving away our energy, it creates an energy deficit in us. So at the same time we're unconsciously giving away our energy over here, we need to be replacing that energy by trying to steal energy from other people over here. And that dynamic is going on inside of everybody, everywhere, all the time. So what I do in the MBL program is I show people how they're, and I'll give you an example if you want. I show people how they're unconsciously giving away their energy, and I give them better habits to practice to stop doing that. And when you stop giving away your energy over here, your need to steal the energy of other people over here goes away because you don't need it. And people around us pick up on that. Those mirror neurons sense that you're not trying to hurt them. You're not trying to steal their energy. And that creates inspirational leadership. That creates trusted advisor relationships. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that guarantees success. Developing your emotional intelligence guarantees career, corporate, and personal success. Guaranteed. Underline, guaranteed.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, if you have somebody that's constantly getting out of their comfort zone and doing things that everyone else is just, or most others are afraid to do,
but that's
obviously
not
they'll
the
get a
thing.
better
The
result.
thing is, the real key here that guarantees success is you're no longer trying to steal other people's energy. You're not giving away your energy, and you're not going to steal theirs because you don't need it. That's the key.
That's the key. Okay. I got it. So if we have somebody listening right now who's not taking the actions, they know what they should do. They know what they want to do. They're not taking the action that they need to take.
Mm-hmm.
What can they do?
Mm-hmm.
If you're coaching them, what would you tell them or advise them to do?
Get connected with some desired result that motivates you to take action.
That's it.
That's always the first. Without that, nothing changes. That's the fuel. That's the gas you put in the car to begin the journey. If you don't put the gas in the car, you're not going anywhere. So without that motivation, you're not going anywhere. Nothing changes.
That's Simon Sinek's start with why
Yeah,
concept.
absolutely.
Start with why.
And the why is the emotion. The how and the what is intellectual.
Got it.
And matter of fact, that's what all of Apple's marketing, if you can think about it, they don't tell you how they do what they do, or they tell you why they did it in the first place. See, they're trying to connect emotionally with the people they seek to serve. They're not talking about features and benefits. They're talking about why they built it.
Yeah, it's the misfits, the crazy ones, right?
Yeah. So they're trying to create an emotional connection.
Yeah, they do such a great job at it. Okay, as a father of two young boys, what can I do to help grow their EQ?
That great question. The best thing you can do for your kids is develop your emotional intelligence. The best thing you can do for the people you serve, the best thing you can do for your family, the best thing you can do for all of us is bet on yourself by developing your emotional intelligence.
You just gave me chills, Phil. You gave me chills. I've read a quote 2 weeks ago that's like in alignment with what you're saying. And it said, it was something along the lines of, one of the biggest forms of child abuse is a parent who's not going after their dreams.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, it stuck with me. And
Yep.
that's really what you're saying.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. See, if you're not going after your dreams, you're giving away your energy to your fear. And guess who you're trying to steal energy from? Take a guess.
I guess it's going to be your children.
Everybody you come in contact with,
Everybody.
including your children.
So say that again. If you're not following your dreams, that means you're following your fears.
Yep. And you're giving away your energy to your fear. Okay. And you need to replace the energy you're giving away by trying to steal it from anybody you can.
Okay, but if I am following my dreams, aren't I giving the energy away just towards the dreams?
You're not giving it away. You're not giving it away. You're fulfilling what living and working on purpose means for you. That's not giving away your energy.
So just so I understand the distinction, giving away energy is when you're not doing what's in alignment.
Let me give you an example. This is one of the MBL habits called authentic listening. The key to authentic listening is not to take anything personally. How somebody feels about you, whether they like you or whether they hate you, has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what's going on inside of them. But if how you feel about you is based on how anybody else feels about you, who's running your life, you or them?
Them.
That's the whole basis of social media. People fall over themselves to give away their energy to get people to like them in order to be able to like themselves. If you like me, I like me. If you don't like me, I don't like me. So that's just one example of how it's baked into us culturally to give away our energy. And when we do that, it creates an automatic need for us to steal the energy of other people. And guess what? Look at all the drama, chaos, and conflict we're surrounded with on a daily basis. It's not a surprise. It's a direct result of people unconsciously giving away their energy and needing to steal the energy of others as a consequence. When you teach people how to stop giving away their energy, the organization automatically self-corrects. You can heal yourself. You can heal the organization by simply helping people to realize and to stop giving away their energy. It's called agency or freedom.
Wow. You know, they say some of the best communicators are ones who can take a very complicated issue and simplify it in a way that, you know, a 9-year-old will understand it. And I think you did that for us today, Phil. You took some complex topics. You made me think about things that I have not thought about. And I think that our listeners would find that to be true. How can people learn more about you and learn more about some of your philosophies?
I can give you. I can put a link to my Zoom calendar. If anybody wants to have a chat, they can just jump on my calendar, and I'd be happy to meet with them. I also have a newsletter I publish daily on emotional intelligence on my through my LinkedIn profile. So I've got about 161 articles already on there, so there's lots to read. So they can either contact me directly or through what I'm going to give you, or they can contact me through my LinkedIn profile, Phil Johnson, or Master of Business Leadership.
Awesome. And you have a YouTube channel as well, Master
of Business Leadership. Yeah.
Business Leadership. Awesome. Phil, thank you so much for being here. I learned a ton. I hope you guys did too. And if you enjoyed this episode, give Phil 5 stars, reach out to him on LinkedIn, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Bye, everybody. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Eric.